There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the silence stretches so long it begins to hum with questions. You wonder if heaven has forgotten your name, if your prayers have slipped between the cracks of eternity, if the promise whispered long ago was merely a dream your hope mistook for truth. But that silence, though it aches, has always been the language of preparation. It is not the absence of God's voice, but the shaping of your ears to hear it. The delay is not denial, it is the divine pause before the music begins. For when God says, "Get ready," it's your turn now. He is not simply offering opportunity. He is revealing that every unseen moment was part of his design. In the hidden places, you have been molded, not abandoned. Like the seed buried beneath the soil, your potential has been pressed in darkness, stretched by the weight of waiting. The world above saw nothing, but heaven was busy. Roots were being formed where eyes could not see, strength was being born where applause could not reach. You felt the loneliness of being overlooked, but that obscurity was your training ground. The silence was teaching you to stand without recognition, to believe without evidence, to hope without reason. The greatest victories are not won when the crowd is cheering, but when no one is watching and you still choose to trust. Now, the atmosphere shifts. Something begins to stir, not around you, but within you. You sense it in the quiet hours of dawn, in the restlessness of your spirit that no comfort can quiet. It is the whisper of divine timing, the sacred murmur that says, "Rise." Not because you are suddenly strong, but because the one who called you has decided that strength will meet you as you step. There is no trumpet, no fanfare, no light cracking the sky. Only the same familiar world that now feels different, charged, almost electric, with the awareness that your name has been spoken in heaven. You may tremble, but trembling has never disqualified the chosen. Moses stuttered, David was small, and Esther hid her fear behind courage. But when their turn came, heaven did not ask for perfection, only obedience. The command to get ready is not a demand for flawless readiness. It is an invitation to trust. It is God saying, "I have gone before you. The path is already blessed. Walk." Every tear you have shed, every closed door you thought would never open, every night you spent asking, "Why?" has now become a thread in the tapestry of your readiness. The pain was not wasted, it was woven into purpose. The delays were not divine neglect, but divine choreography, arranging your steps to meet the right moment. You see, readiness in the kingdom is not about having everything in place. It's about having your heart aligned with His will. When God says, "It's your turn," He is not changing His plan, He is revealing the next page of a story already written. You are not stepping into uncertainty, but into fulfillment. The long silence before this moment was heaven preparing the stage, setting the lights, tuning the instruments of destiny. Now, the curtain begins to rise. You are not who you were when the waiting began. You are stronger, wiser, and humbler. The silence has done its work. The soil has released the seed. The season of hiddenness gives way to revelation. Get ready then, not in anxiety, but in awe. For what is coming is not merely an opportunity, but an unveiling of purpose. The voice that once felt distant now moves closer, saying, "It's your turn." And though you may not yet see the full path ahead, you can feel it. The pulse of destiny beating in rhythm with your faith. The quiet assurance that every delay was leading to this moment, that heaven's silence was never absence, but orchestration, that the wait has ended because the time has come. Patience is not a talent, it is a furnace. It is not learned in comfort, but in the long corridors of uncertainty where the heart must trust what the eyes cannot see. The hidden seasons are where God performs His most delicate work, where He forms not the image you show the world, but the structure of your soul. These are the quiet years when nothing seems to move, when prayers echo back unanswered, and when purpose feels like a rumor whispered to everyone except you. And yet, these are the very moments that shape the fiber of faith, the deep roots that keep a soul from breaking, when the wind of destiny begins to blow. In hiddenness, you are stripped of applause and stripped of control, and that is precisely the point. You see, Patience is not passive, it is active surrender. It is the deliberate choice to stay where God has placed you, even when everything in you screams to move. The world calls such waiting foolishness, but heaven calls it strength. For impatience builds monuments to the self, while patience builds altars to trust. In these unseen stretches of time, you are being taught to depend not on outcomes, but on the one who holds them. You are being trained to let go of the need to see progress and to find peace in obedience alone. Every season of delay is a classroom where heaven teaches endurance. The lessons are not written in words, but in the language of stillness. You begin to notice how the sunrise takes its time, how the tide returns in its own rhythm, how even the stars wait for the dark before they shine. Creation itself preaches patience because it knows the tempo of its creator. And so must you. When God hides you, He is not punishing you. He is protecting the promise within you from premature exposure. The butterfly cannot be forced from its cocoon without destroying its wings. Likewise, what is forming inside you cannot be rushed without ruin. Patience refines your perspective. What once looked like stagnation now becomes sacred preparation. The hidden seasons teach you that not all progress is visible. Sometimes the most significant growth is the kind that no one can see. When you feel unseen, you begin to realize that visibility was never the goal. Faithfulness was. The applause of men can build a platform, but only the approval of heaven can build a purpose. And so you wait, not idly, but intentionally. You keep showing up. You keep serving. You keep believing that even in silence, God is speaking through process. There will be moments when you want to quit, when the waiting feels endless and the promise feels faint. But even then, patience whispers, stay. Because the longer you wait with faith, the more you learn to discern God's movement in stillness. You discover that He does not rush like men do. He arrives in perfect timing. The heart that learns patience becomes steady. It stops panicking at delays and starts perceiving purpose in them. What you thought was wasted time becomes the womb of transformation. And in that stillness, something sacred happens. Your desires begin to align with His. You stop praying merely for your turn to come and start praying to be ready when it does. You begin to trust that the same hand that kept you hidden will one day lift you into view, not because you demanded it, but because you were made ready for it. The waiting reshapes your posture from striving to surrender. It cleanses ambition and replaces it with purpose. It burns away fear and replaces it with faith. So when God finally says, "Get ready, it's your turn now," the patient soul doesn't rush forward in pride. It walks forward in peace. Because patience has done its work. The hidden season has birthed maturity. You no longer need to prove yourself. You only need to be yourself, as God made you to be. Every silent day, every unanswered prayer, every lonely night has been woven into your readiness. And now, the patience that once felt like delay becomes the foundation of your destiny. You waited well, and heaven took note. It is one of the great mysteries of divine design, that purpose so often hides in the ordinary. We imagine that calling must arrive wrapped in splendor, that destiny will announce itself with thunder, that heaven's assignments will come written on clouds. Yet when God moves, He so often comes softly, quietly, dressed in the fabric of everyday life. The great unveiling of purpose rarely happens on a mountaintop. It begins in the mundane, the familiar streets, the daily tasks, the overlooked corners where obedience meets obscurity. The sacred often disguises itself as simple. The divine often hides beneath the daily. We spend much of life waiting for a big moment, not realizing that purpose is already unfolding in the small ones. God does not only reveal Himself in miracles, but also in routines. The hand that parted seas is the same hand that helps you rise each morning. Speak kindness to a stranger, forgive an old wound, or persevere through a quiet day of unnoticed work. Every act of faithfulness is a rehearsal for the greater work to come. What seems insignificant to you may be the very ground where destiny is taking root. The carpenter's shop prepared a savior for the cross long before the crowds ever gathered to hear Him speak. The ordinary is the proving ground of purpose. It tests not your talent, but your trust. It asks, will you be faithful here, when no one sees? For if you cannot be steadfast in the shadows, you will stumble in the spotlight. The unveiling of purpose is not sudden. It is gradual, like dawn breaking across the horizon. First a faint glow, then the slow spreading of light, and finally the full clarity of day. But the glow begins long before the world sees it. The soul that has been shaped in silence begins to recognize the divine rhythm beneath the surface of things. When you start to see with heaven's eyes, nothing remains ordinary. The conversation you almost ignored becomes a divine appointment. The small act of kindness becomes a ripple in eternity. The season you once resented becomes the soil of revelation. Purpose does not appear as something new. It is something old that suddenly makes sense. You realize that even your detours were directions in disguise, that every delay was divine redirection, that every loss was making room for a greater gift. We often ask God for a revelation of purpose, but He instead gives us opportunities for obedience. For revelation is not granted to the curious. It is entrusted to the faithful. Purpose is not discovered in seeking greatness, but in serving where you are. The holy is hidden in the human, waiting for eyes trained by patience to see it. God does not call the stage ready, He calls the surrendered. And when He finally whispers, "It's your turn," He is not giving you something new, but unveiling what He has been building in you all along. This unveiling is not the arrival of purpose. It is its recognition. The path you thought was random suddenly reveals a pattern. The tears you shed in confusion become the water that softened your heart to compassion. The lessons you learned in hardship become the wisdom you will one day speak into others' lives. The pain that seemed purposeless now shines with meaning. You realize that nothing was wasted, not the silence, not the waiting, not the ordinary days that felt like forever. Every part of the journey was preparation for the moment you now face. The unveiling of purpose is both gentle and holy. It does not come with noise but with knowing. You sense that the same hands that held you in hiding now release you into calling. You no longer strive to be seen, because you have seen the one who sent you. And that knowing changes everything. The ordinary becomes sacred, the small becomes significant, the unnoticed becomes eternal. So when God says, "Get ready," it's your turn now. It may not mean a stage or a spotlight. It may simply mean that your purpose, long hidden beneath layers of the everyday, has now reached its appointed hour. And as you step forward, you realize the miracle was never in the moment itself. It was in how the ordinary days prepared your heart to see it. There is a stillness that comes before the call, a sacred pause where heaven waits to see if the heart will answer. Courage is not born in noise. It is conceived in quietness. It is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move in spite of it. When God says, "Get ready," it's your turn now. He is not calling the unafraid. He is calling the willing. The invitation to rise always comes wrapped in uncertainty. The path ahead is seldom clear, and the heart trembles at the thought of stepping into the unknown. But that trembling is holy. It is the proof that faith is about to do something it has never done before. Courage begins not with a roar, but with a whisper. "Yes, Lord." That whisper shakes eternity more than the loudest applause. It is the sound of a soul choosing trust over comfort. For the truth is, the most dangerous thing in life is not failure. It is staying in the safety of what is familiar when God has called you beyond it. To rise when called means to walk out of the shadows of doubt, to lay down the excuses that have guarded your fear, and to believe that if God has chosen you, then He has already equipped you. You may not feel ready, but readiness is not a feeling, it is a posture of surrender. Think of how many callings have begun with trembling hands. The shepherd boy stepping into a battlefield with only a sling. The young woman standing before a king with only faith. The fisherman leaving his nets to follow a voice. Each of them felt small, but smallness is never a problem for God. It is the stage upon which His strength performs its wonders. When you rise in obedience, heaven moves with you. The courage to rise does not come from your strength, but from His presence. Fear may walk beside you, but it cannot lead you. The one who called you walks ahead, clearing the way, lighting the path one step at a time. Rising when called requires more than bravery. It demands trust in divine timing. There is a rhythm to God's call, a sacred sequence in which everything has been arranged. To move too soon is to miss alignment. To move too late is to miss opportunity. But when the call comes, it carries a certain weight that your spirit cannot ignore. It feels less like a choice and more like a destiny tugging on your soul. It's as though heaven itself whispers your name into the wind, and the world begins to echo it back. You sense that you were made for this moment, not by ambition, but by preparation, not by accident, but by appointment. The courage to rise is quiet, because it comes from a place deeper than emotion. It comes from knowing who called you. It comes from remembering every moment. He sustained you when you thought you would break. It comes from recalling how his silence shaped your strength, how his delays taught your heart to depend on him alone. You rise not because you feel powerful, but because you trust the one who is. And that trust, quiet, trembling but unwavering, is what turns ordinary men and women into instruments of divine purpose. To rise is to declare that fear will not dictate your future. It is to say, I may not have everything I think I need, but I have the one who sent me. It is to believe that grace will meet you where preparation ends. The courage to rise is the bridge between waiting and walking. It is the moment faith stops talking about obedience and begins to live it. Heaven does not require perfection from you, only a willing heart. The step you take in fear becomes the doorway to your next season. And once you rise, you realize something sacred. The fear does not vanish, but it loses its authority. You discover that obedience itself is the victory, that the simple act of standing when you could have stayed seated becomes a testimony in heaven's records. You rise not because you see the end, but because you know the one who holds it. And in that quiet rising, the atmosphere of your life changes. The unseen becomes visible, the impossible becomes possible, and the long silence of waiting is broken by the sound of movement. So when God says, "It's your turn now," do not wait for confidence. Move with conviction. The courage to rise is not about certainty, it is about surrender. It is the heart saying, I will go, even if I must go trembling. And heaven smiles, for that trembling step is the one that changes everything. There is a rhythm to heaven that the hurried heart cannot hear. A divine timing that moves like the tide, unseen, unstoppable, perfectly measured. While we count days, God measures seasons. While we chase moments, He crafts eternity. His timing is never early enough to satisfy impatience, nor late enough to betray His promise. It arrives in the silent perfection of purpose, in the precise second when what He has built within you aligns with what He has prepared before you. To walk with God, then, is to surrender to the mystery of His timing, to trust that the unseen clock of heaven keeps perfect time, even when yours seems broken. Every delay, every detour, every unanswered prayer is part of a greater choreography. Life often feels like chaos, but to the eyes of heaven, it is a symphony, every note arranged, every pause meaningful. The silence between seasons is not empty space, it is sacred tempo. We are so quick to fill it, to rush ahead, to demand clarity. But God is not hurried by our haste. He is the composer who knows when to let a note linger before the crescendo. The moment you think He has forgotten you may be the very moment He is aligning every detail for your unveiling. The mystery of timing lies in this. God is not simply preparing your blessing, He is preparing you for it. You see, early success can crush an unready soul, and premature revelation can spoil untested faith. So He delays, not to punish, but to protect. The waiting refines your desires, sharpens your discernment, and steadies your heart. By the time the door opens, you are no longer chasing what you once wanted. You are ready for what He always intended. What once felt like delay now reveals itself as design. Consider how nature mirrors this truth. The seed does not question the soil. The sun does not hurry the dawn. The river does not demand the ocean. Each knows its appointed time. And yet, when the moment arrives, everything flows effortlessly into place. So it is with divine timing. When your season comes, no force can hinder it. What took years of silence will suddenly unfold in days. People will call it luck or fate, but you will know it was timing. Not yours, but His. There are moments when you will feel out of rhythm, when others seem to move ahead while you remain still. Do not envy their pace. Every life has its appointed clock, its sacred sequence of unfolding. What God is building in you may require deeper roots, because the weight of your purpose demands a stronger foundation. You cannot compare your season to another's, for their timeline is not your prophecy. The mystery of timing is that it is both personal and perfect. It fits your story as if time itself was written for you. And then, when the appointed hour arrives, it does not announce itself with warning. It comes quietly, like dawn touching the edge of night. One day, you will wake and realize that the things you prayed for are no longer distant. They are here. The doors that resisted you now open, as if they were waiting for your touch. The opportunities that once slipped through your fingers now rest gently in your grasp. Not because you forced them, but because the moment has matured. Heaven has turned its page, and your name is written on it. This is the wonder of divine orchestration, that even your mistakes are folded into mercy, that even detours lead to destiny. The hand of God conducts every movement with precision, every encounter, every loss, every silence. What felt like wandering was guidance in disguise. What felt like waiting was alignment in progress. You were never off schedule, you were always being synchronized with eternity's clock. When God finally says, "Get ready, it's your turn now," it will not come as a surprise to Him. It will be the moment He has been preparing since before time began. You will look back and see how every delay was mercy, every setback was protection, every closed door was a rerouting to the right one. The mystery will no longer trouble you, it will humble you. You will realize that His timing was not slow, it was sacred. So do not despise the pauses. Do not fear the waiting. For the one who writes your story knows how long each chapter should last. And when the next page turns, when heaven's clock strikes your appointed hour, all that seemed delayed will suddenly make sense. What once was mystery will reveal itself as masterpiece. There comes a point when waiting must give way to walking, when the season of stillness turns into the season of movement. Yet, in God's rhythm, this transition is not abrupt. It is sacred. It is not the restless surge of ambition, but the calm unfolding of obedience. Waiting and walking are not opposites. They are partners in the dance of destiny. Waiting teaches trust, walking proves it. One refines your heart in silence, the other reveals it in action. The one who has learned to wait rightly will walk wisely. For the strength to move forward is born in the patience to stay still until the call comes. Waiting is not a pause in purpose. It is preparation for it. Each moment spent in waiting stretches your faith, deepens your listening, and aligns your pace with heaven's. You begin to recognize that waiting is not idleness but intimacy. It is the soul leaning close to hear when God will say, "No." For when that word is spoken, it releases not just permission, but power. The same voice that held you still now sends you forward, and the steps you take are no longer your own. They are guided, sustained, and timed by divine hands. But the shift from waiting to walking demands sensitivity. Many rise too soon, mistaking impatience for instruction, while others hesitate too long, mistaking fear for wisdom. The sacred exchange happens when your will and God's will meet in perfect surrender. It is the moment your heart says, "I will no longer try to control the timing. I will trust the caller." And suddenly, the way becomes clear, not because the path has changed, but because your perspective has. You stop asking, "When will it happen?" and start saying, "Lord, I'm ready when you are." That readiness is the turning point where waiting transforms into walking. There is a divine mystery in how the act of walking reveals what waiting could not. You begin to see how the lessons learned in stillness sustain you in motion. The patience that once felt heavy becomes the strength beneath your stride. The silence that once frustrated you now echoes with reassurance. You realize that the waiting was never wasted, It built the character required to carry the calling. You walk not in haste, but in harmony, knowing that every step has already been ordained. In this sacred exchange, your posture shifts from longing to living. You no longer wait for permission to be who God called you to be. You simply walk as one who has already been chosen. The fear of missing your moment dissolves, because you understand that every moment with Him is the moment. Each act of obedience, each step of faith, becomes a continuation of your waiting, now expressed in movement. You are no longer holding your breath for destiny to arrive. You are breathing it in, one step at a time. And yet, even as you walk, you find that waiting does not vanish. It becomes internal. You learn to wait within the walk, to move without rushing, to act without anxiety. This is the maturity of faith, to be in motion outwardly while remaining still inwardly. To let your feet move but your heart rest. You no longer measure progress by speed but by surrender. You understand that the goal is not merely to reach a destination, but to stay in step with the one who called you. This balance between waiting and walking is the rhythm of divine partnership. It is where heaven and earth move together, where obedience becomes worship. Every delay was preparing you for this, teaching you to hear His timing, to follow His pace, to trust that even in movement, you are still being guided. The waiting shaped your humility. The walking will reveal your faith. Together they form the complete song of calling, the still notes and the strides, the silence and the steps. So when God says, "Get ready, it's your turn now," it is not merely a command to move. It is an invitation to exchange waiting for walking without losing the wisdom of stillness. It is the call to rise with reverence, to walk with wonder, to carry the peace of the waiting place into the movement of destiny. For those who have learned to wait well will never walk in haste, and those who walk in His timing will never walk alone. The sacred exchange is complete when you realize that waiting was never about delay. It was about learning how to walk with God when the moment finally arrived.